Adam, this is Emmett, my stepdaughter said. The guy my mom settled for. She said it the way you'd read a caption off a photograph. No heat in it. No cruelty, even. Just a fact she'd carried so long she'd stopped noticing the weight. Everybody laughed. Her mother laughed. That small laugh you do to make a thing smaller. I laughed too. 22 years, I've laughed. One person at that table didn't. Her fiancé, 29 years old, in a gray suit I recognized because I'd watched him sit in it 9 hours earlier on the 14th floor of my building while he told a hiring panel what he thought held the structure up. He looked at me, and I watched the young man's entire future land at his face at once, because his offer letter was in a folder on my desk, drafted at 4 that afternoon, signed, unsent. Mine is the name at the bottom of it. Now, I could have ended that dinner with one sentence. I could have ended his career with one email, and nobody in the world would have known why. I want you to hold both of those in your hands for a second, because I held them for 4 days. I'm going to tell you what I did instead. But first you need to know about a beam under a floor. My name is Emmett. I'm 68, and for most of my life, I've been the least interesting man in every room I've walked into, which is a thing I have worked at. I met Rosalind when I was 45. Roz, a school secretary with a bad house, a good daughter, and a husband who'd gone out for a career in Denver 6 years earlier and never circled back. I met her because I was hired to look at a crack. That's how the great love of my life started. A crack in a foundation wall on a Saturday for $200. That house is the whole story, so be precise about it. A 1938 two-story on Delacorte Street, in the process of quietly deciding to sit down. 11-foot step crack through the foundation. A center girder carrying more than it agreed to since the Eisenhower administration. Roz had a quote for $11,000 she didn't have. I told her $11,000 was fair. Then I heard myself say something I'd never once said to a client in 26 years. Or I could do it on weekends. She said, "Why would you do that?" And I said, and I've thought about this sentence every day since, because it's a good house and somebody should get under it. We married 2 years later. I was 47. Her daughter was 8. Here's the thing about me, and it isn't modesty, it's the shape of the man. I have never in my life known how to say a thing. My father was a millwright who communicated exclusively by fixing your bicycle without mentioning it. I inherited that system intact, and I've spent 68 years discovering it doesn't work on human beings and doing it anyway. So when I married a woman with a frightened 8-year-old daughter, I didn't sit her down and tell her I loved her mother. I didn't tell her I would never go to Denver. I went under the house. Tessa was 6 when her father left. I want to be fair to her, because this story is a lie if she's a villain, and she isn't. She learned one lesson at 6 years old and never got the chance to unlearn it. The man in the front hall is temporary, and if you love him, it will cost you. Grant Merrick was a hell of a man to be 6 years old around. He filled a room like weather. He'd show up with a kite in November, then be gone 11 weeks, then back, then gone for good, and by then Tessa had built the only defense a kid can build. I saw it coming. I always see it coming. I'm not going to be stupid twice. Then a 47-year-old structural engineer with sensible shoes married her mother and moved in. She was polite. God, she was polite. That's what people don't understand. She never screamed at me. Not once in 22 years. She said please and thank you, and she called me Emmett at 8, at 15, at 30. She's never called me anything else. I've never asked her to. Roz had one rule, and she said it exactly once, on our wedding night of all nights. She sets the pace, Em. Whatever it is. She sets it. I agreed. And here's something I've only understood in the last few months. Agreeing to that was the coward's move, wearing the gentleman's coat. It meant I never had to risk anything. Never had to cross that living room, say a hard sentence, and have it thrown back at me. Patient is a very comfortable place to hide. 22 years, and the pace never got above 0. Now, the third stair. When Tessa was 8, the summer I was still doing the crawl space on weekends before the wedding, she jumped off the third stair every single day. Grabbed the newel post, swing out, land flat-footed in the front hall with a bang you could hear in the kitchen. And that floor was sick. Every time she landed, the whole front hall moved. The china and the cabinet talked. And Roz, exhausted, holding the entire thing together with 2 jobs and a smile, would call out, "Tessa, honey, don't jump. The house. Don't jump. The house." So here's what I did. Because it's the only language I have. I spent 2 years under that house. Jacked the center of it a ½ inch at a time over 4 months so the plaster wouldn't crack. Sistered every joist in the front hall. Poured 2 footings by hand. And in the spring of the second year, I sized a laminated beam myself and got it into that crawl space alone. Alone, because I didn't want anyone watching me do it, and set it under the front hall floor. That floor has not moved a 1/16 of an inch in 22 years. She never jumped again. Not once. Not one time after that first summer. For 2 decades, I told myself she'd gotten too old for it. That's what I said in the dark, under her floor, with a work light in my teeth. She didn't get too old for it. She stopped the summer I showed up. Everything she loved in that house, she put down the moment I touched it, because loving things in front of a man is how you get hurt when he leaves. I solved the wrong problem for 22 years. That's the most honest description of stepfather I know how to write. Here's the part nobody at that table has ever asked about. I started at Brandt and Kell at 19 as a draftsman. Pencil on vellum. Both Brandt and Kell are long dead. Kell taught me structure the way a mean uncle teaches you to swim. And I loved him, and he'd have been appalled to hear it. I never left. Draftsman, structural, senior structural, principal. 19 years ago, Kell's estate wanted out and a national was circling, so I mortgaged everything and bought it. I've owned it outright for 11 years. 140 people. My name isn't on the door and never will be. Clients trust an old name, and nobody alive trusts a new one. I still review the structural set on every project over a certain size, and I sit in on the final round for every engineer we hire. In a cardigan, in the corner, with a legal pad. Half the candidates assume I'm from IT. That's not a bit. I've spent 49 years learning one skill, and it's the only one I have. Everybody wants to draw the face of a building. I draw what holds it up. That's the whole resume. A life on the parts nobody photographs, sheer walls behind drywall, footings under dirt, the beam nobody will ever see that is, right now, the only reason the room above it is a room. Tessa knows I work at Brandt and Kell. She's known that since she was 8. She thinks I do drafting. She isn't being cruel. I told her I was a draftsman when I was 1, and then the years went by, and I never issued a correction, because a correction meant sitting across from her and saying, "Look at me," and I'd already agreed she sets the pace. In 22 years, nobody in that family ever asked the follow-up question. Adam Finn was the last of 3 finalists. 29. 6 years at a bad firm that used him as a calculator. 3rd time applying to us. I ask every finalist the same question, and I've asked it for 11 years, and it's the only one I care about. Show me the ugliest thing you've ever built, and tell me why you're proud of it. They panic. Every single time. They show you a parking structure and apologize for it. Adam Finn opened his laptop and showed me a retaining wall. 12 feet of concrete behind an elementary school in his hometown. Nothing to look at. Holding back a hillside that came down in 2019 and put mud through a kindergarten. And he said, "I wrote on my legal pad, I still have the page. Nobody's ever going to photograph it." But every morning 400 kids walk past that wall and nothing happens to them. It's the only thing I've built that does its job every single day and never asks anybody to notice. I sat in the corner in my cardigan and thought, there he is. The panel voted unanimously. Offer letter drafted at 4. Sat on my desk in a folder for Thursday's send. He never mentioned my name. Not in the application, not in the panel, not in the hallway. I found out later why, and when I did, I had to sit down. 3 weeks earlier, he'd told Tessa he was applying to Brant and Kell, and he'd said, because he's the kind of man who says this, wait, isn't that where your stepdad works? Should I mention it? And Tessa laughed and said, God, no, don't. He does drafting, Adam. He's been there since the 90s. It wouldn't help you. So he didn't. Sit with the shape of that. My stepdaughter's contempt for me is the exact and only reason that young man's offer is clean. He walked in with no leverage because she told him I wasn't worth any. That's the strangest gift anyone's ever given me, and she'll never know she gave it. Tessa got engaged in March. We found out in April by text. Roz, the strongest person I've ever met, and the only human being Tessa half lets in, spent 5 weeks getting a dinner on the calendar. We knew his name was Adam. That's all. Tessa doesn't give surnames. Never has. I understand that now. You can't lose a man you never fully named. We got there first. Roz were the earrings. Then the door opened and a young man in a gray suit walked in behind my stepdaughter, and I watched him see me from 30 feet away. He stopped. 1 step, barely, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking. His face went through about 4 things in a second and a half, and I'll tell you what none of them were. The owner. He didn't know that. He thought he was looking at the old man from the corner of the conference room, the IT guy with the legal pad. He thought he'd been quietly interviewed by his fiancé's stepfather without knowing it, which, in his profession, follows you. He came to the table like a man walking onto ice, and Tessa said, Adam, this is Emmett, the guy my mom settled for, and everybody laughed. Now, the way this scene gets told wrong is the way it gets told loud. There was no scene. Nobody yelled. It was a pleasant dinner. That's the horror of it. Tessa was in a better mood than I'd seen in years because she was happy, because she was in love, and a happy Tessa is generous, and a generous Tessa is funnier, and the material she had at hand was me. Emmett's very handy, she told him. That's the thing about Emmett. If it's broken, Emmett's your guy. And later, Mom's whole thing was stability. Right, Mom? After Dad, she just wanted a floor. And she got one. And Roz, my Roz, opened her mouth. 22 years, and I watched my wife finally load the sentence. And I put my hand over hers under the table and squeezed once. That was the 22-year mistake. And I made it one more time on purpose in front of a witness. Meanwhile, there's a 4th person at that table, and he is dying. Adam Finn is having the worst 90 minutes of his life with a fork in his hand, because he knows what nobody else there knows. 9 hours ago, this man listened to him talk for 50 minutes about a retaining wall. And he can't say it. What's he going to do? Correct her on the first night with the man sitting right there. So he ate. Every time she said my name, his jaw went tight. Twice he tried to change the subject. Once he said, it sounds like you two have known each other a long time, which I thought was a hell of a good try from a drowning man. When we said good night, he shook my hand and held it a half second longer than a man needs to. It was really good to meet you, sir. He looked me right in the eye, and what he meant was, I'm sorry, and I don't know what to do. I said, you too, Adam. 2 words and a name. 22 years. And that's the whole speech. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 1 in the morning, I got the work light out of the garage, went down through the hatch of my good shirt, and crawled 11 feet on my back on cold dirt until my shoulder touched the beam. 68 years old. I want to be exact about what I was doing down there, because it wasn't nostalgia. It was arithmetic. 2 live things in my hands. 1, an offer letter with my signature on it, unsent, for a man whose only crime was falling in love with the wrong woman. 2, a sentence, deliverable at any Sunday dinner for the rest of my life, and it would take my stepdaughter apart in front of the man she loves. Ask Adam who ran his interview. 6 words. That's the whole bomb. I lay under that floor and built it in my head. The Sunday, the sentence, the look on her face, 22 years rewritten in an afternoon. I built it, I furnished it, and I lived in it about an hour. And then the work light swung and caught the far end of the beam, up in the shadow where the joists come down, where no human being would ever have cause to look. And I saw my own handwriting. Carpenter's pencil. 2003, 2 lines. The first is a load calculation, the sizing, my numbers, my initials. The second one just says, so she can jump. I'd forgotten I wrote it. I'd forgotten I was ever a man who would write that. I lay in the dirt under my stepdaughter's floor and finally understood, at 68, what I'd actually spent my life doing. It was not waiting for her notice. I came up at 3. I was at work at 7. Thursday morning, Adam Finn walked in my building and told the front desk he needed to withdraw his application. Withdrawing from a job before he even knew he'd gotten it, because he had a conflict he hadn't disclosed, and he'd rather lose it than have it dirty. Dev, who runs our talent side, called me, kid downstairs withdrawing. Something about a conflict. You want this one? I said yes. They brought him up to 14. He came through my door already apologizing, and then he stopped, looking at the corner office, at 40 years of framed drawings on the wall, and at the old man from the corner of the conference room sitting behind the desk. Sit down, Adam. He sat down like his legs had been repossessed. Sir, I swear to God I didn't know. Not until I walked into that restaurant. If I'd known you were on that panel. Adam. And I never used it. I never even said you're. Adam. I waited until he stopped. I know why you didn't mention me. You asked her 3 weeks ago. Should I mention it? Is that weird? And she told you it wouldn't help you. He went red to the ears, because that's when he understood I'd known for 22 years exactly what she thought of me, and had sat at that table on Tuesday, knowing it while everyone laughed. The panel was unanimous before I opened my mouth. He was the only finalist in 11 years to answer the ugly building question with a retaining wall. I'd have hired him if he were marrying a stranger from Portugal. Then I said the part that mattered. Here's the real problem, so don't let me talk you out of it. If you take this job, you'll spend 30 years wondering. And worse, she'll tell you. Not to be cruel. She'll just say it one night when you're both tired, and then it's in the room forever. He knew it was true, so we're going to build around it, I said. That's what I do, son. When a load can't go through a member, you don't argue with the member. You find another path to the ground. So I recused myself from his file. Permanently. He doesn't report to me. Never will. I don't see his reviews. I don't sit on his promotion panel. My partners hold that in writing. You'll never find out what you're worth from me, I told him. You'll find it out from people who don't know your girlfriend's last name, which is how it should have worked anyway. He said a long time. Then, quietly, why didn't you say anything on Tuesday? 1 sentence. You had it right there. And I gave him the only true thing I had. Because I've been under that girl's floor for 22 years, and she's never looked down once. If I make her look now, by hurting her, she'll never look again. I have to tell her. I know. I can't be engaged to someone and carry this. I know that too. He stood up. At the door, he turned around. Sir, what is it you actually do here? I said, structure. She came to the house on Sunday. Alone. She'd been crying in the car. You could see it. She came in through the front door, into the front hall, onto that floor, and she stood there and she was angry, which I expected. Anger is the last exit before the truth. You let me, she said. 22 years. You sat there and let me say it. Do you know what that makes me? Tessa, you could have told me once. I know. Then why didn't you? I didn't have a speech. I've never had a speech. So I did the only thing I know how to do, which is show a person the drawing instead of describing it. I said, come here a minute. And I took my 30-year-old stepdaughter, in her good coat, through the kitchen and down through the hatch in the utility room floor. She said, Emmett, what? And I said, "It's clean, follow me." And my wife stood in the doorway with a dish towel and did not say one word. 11 feet on our backs in the dark. 68 and 30. I put the work light on the beam. I didn't say anything. I just moved it to the far end, into the shadow where the joists come down, and held it there. She read it 3 times. I know because I counted. Then she made a sound I'm going to hear for the rest of my life. "You did this in 2003, she said. I was 8, 9 by the spring. Emmett, and then wrecked into the dirt. I stopped jumping. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "I know why, too. I worked it out about 48 hours ago. We stayed under that house a long time." She asked why I never told her about the firm, why her mother never told her. I gave her the honest answer. Roz had wanted to 1,000 times, and I wouldn't let her. "She sets the pace" was the most comfortable lie I ever told myself. She said, "I don't know what to call you." I said, "You don't have to call me anything." That was never the deal. Here's what I believe. After 49 years of drawing the parts nobody photographs. Every room you've ever stood in is held up by something you've never once looked at. There's a beam over your head right now, and you don't know its size, its species, or who set it, and you never will. And that isn't a tragedy. That's what a beam is for. It's true of tables, too. Every family is standing on somebody. Usually the quiet one. Usually the one they've got a nickname for. And I could have made her look. A story where the man never wanted revenge is a lie. I had the sentence, the timing, and the room. For days I carried it. But a beam that announces itself isn't a beam anymore. It's a pillar in the middle of your living room, and everybody has to walk around it forever. She married Adam in September. I sat in the 4th row, where I like it. He's 4 years into a career I will never touch. Last month a partner told me the Finn kid's going to be dangerous in 10 years, and I said, "Is he?" and went in my office and closed the door for a minute. Tessa's never called me dad. She's 31. I don't expect she will. But about 6 weeks after the crawl space, I came home on a Tuesday, stood on the porch with my hand on the doorknob, and heard a sound I hadn't heard in 22 years. Bang. Nothing. Then bang again. Through the front window, my stepdaughter, 30 years old, in a work blouse, jumping off the 3rd stair. Over and over, landing flat-footed in the front hall, crying like a child. And the floor didn't move. Not a 16th. Roz was in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel, and she didn't move either. She looked at me through the glass. I did not go in. I stood on my own porch for 11 minutes and let my wife's daughter jump on the floor. I built her, and I have never been so rich. She's never said thank you. Never called me dad. Never asked what I do all day. She jumped. That's the only signature I ever needed. If there's someone at your table holding the whole thing up, and you've got a nickname for them instead, tell me about it in the comments. And if you're the beam, say so. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe because there are a lot more quiet men out there under a lot more floors. I'll see you in the next one.